My guest today is Mark Ainley. Mark is a longtime real estate investor who's rehabbed over 450 properties, as well as the co-founder of GC Realty and Development, a brokerage and property management firm that currently oversees around 1,000 residential doors and 2 million square feet of commercial space throughout the Chicago metro area. He's been featured on CNBC's The Deed, as well as the Bigger Pockets podcast, the Real Estate Mogul podcast, and Joe Fairless's Best Ever podcast, among others. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today to share insights and tips all about how to be an effective property manager.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show.
I would love to start just by learning a little bit more about your background. Can you walk us through how did you get into becoming a property manager and an expert on property management in the first place?
With no direct intention. I could say how we started was, so my first investment property I bought, back then when we got into property management, I didn't even realize property management was an industry, or it wasn't even a service, I guess. In my mind, it was like you collect rent, you respond to maintenance. I didn't even think about it. So we bought our first property and we self-managed it, of course. And, we put the first sad story tenant in there, and we ultimately had to evict her. So that was my first experience of property management. And, we did end up doing the file for eviction, did the modern day cash for keys, and got her to leave. And then we ultimately sold the property. And we said, we are done on the property management side of things. And we were actually kind of checked out of the whole investment side of things there. So that was back my first experience. And on the brokerage side of things, we were working with a lot of investors. So this was time frame wise, 2004, 5, 6. And we were selling a lot of investment properties. Now, selling investment properties back then was not what it's like today. Back then, it was knowing what areas of potential fast equity someone can get because prices kept climbing, and you sold people properties that they're getting 100% loans on. So we found ourselves selling a lot, no matter what, still selling it to investor base. And they kept asking us for property management. And we kept saying, no, you trust me, you don't want us to manage your property. And we fought that off for many years. And ultimately, we sold a true investment property to our attorney. And our attorney was like, Mark, I need you to manage this for me. I said, Paul, no, you're the one that actually helped me evict my only tenant I've ever had. I said, you don't want me to doing that. And he said, but Mark, you've learned it on your own dime, and you know what not to do now. I said, Paul, I don't even know what to charge you. He's like, I'll pay you $50 a month. And he goes, and I go, Paul, you're an attorney. I don't have a management agreement. Like, you're going to want something formal. He's like, Mark, I'll draft something up, and you can use it for someone else if you want to grow that part of your business. And to this day, we still charge him $50 a month. That actual property is still in our portfolio that we manage, and we still use a modified version of that same agreement. So that was 15 years ago. And I remember the conversation we had when we were deciding. I went back after that meeting with our attorney that day, and I was talking to my business partner. He's like, hey, you know what, $50 a month, that covers the espresso cost for our espresso machine. We drank a lot of espresso back then. And that was our justification. And then our second client had 2 properties, and those covered our water cooler and our water bill for the office. So our intent was to be a brokerage company, but we accidentally got into the management space.
Awesome. That's a great story. Cool. I'd love to sort of structure the conversation around property management in 3 phases. One around screening tenants, then managing, then retaining. And so if we just deep dive on attracting and screening good tenants, what are some best practices that you've learned over the years for how to attract good tenants to a property in the first place? Because that really is the foundation of everything. Supposing that you cannot change the property location, like that's a given. What are some strategies that landlords and property managers can follow to actually attract good tenants?
Well, you know what? I actually wrote a blog on that about a week ago, so that's top of mind, I guess. But you know what? I think I see a lot of people out there that say no pets. I think these days there's facts out there that over 50% of tenants right now have pets, or there's like another 18% that might want to get a pet that will not look at your listing at all, just based on you saying no pets. So I always encourage people, even if they're kind of a lot of people say no pets for reasons of fear. They say it because they heard some horror story. And a lot of times I tell people that that horror story you heard had a lot of red flags in the beginning that people ignored, and then you only heard the consequences of some bad decisions early on. But I tell people you can discriminate against pets. It's not there's nothing fair housing that covers pets. So you could put out there small pets only, or dogs only, or cats only, and see what you get. And a lot of times you can collect fees or funds or deposits that will equal your risk. What does it cost to redo all the flooring in your first floor or second floor of the house? What does it cost if they chew X amount of doors and the flooring? So you can cover your costs with that. Or at the same time, you get an application that you just deny because it's like, all right, it's 2 pit bulls. We're not going to mess with this. But just putting the no pets is a big one that I always tell people to try to avoid. They actually have out there now a petscreening.com website that you can screen your pets, and they actually give you a FIDO score, not a FICO score, based on your pet's risk level. And you could charge deposits and fees based on the risk level. And they assess different things such as shots and breed and all that. So that was a lot of pets, but I think it's a big one when I see people say no pets. I know our time frame for how long it takes to fill one that has no pets is about 30% longer than it is with somebody that we do accept pets. Priced right. I think priced right's the other one. All these investors, they do want to maximize the property, but it's sometimes at the cost of having a extra long vacancy. If to have to drop the rent $25 to get it rented a couple of weeks faster, or $50 even, and you'll make more up at the end of that 12 months. So having it priced right. Now, I also am a big component that good tenants, smart tenants, the best tenants are attracted to the best deals. So they're not going to go to the property that's $100 over when there's 4 other in that same market that are $100 less. So what you end up getting is the tenants that got beat out on the best tenant coming to your place, which are not always the best tenants. So we know 2 reasons. 2 of the main reasons we know we're priced too high is no activity. It's an obvious one, but there's activity going on in your market no matter what, and you just price yourself outside of that activity. And then bad activity, the sad stories and the long explanation in the inquiry of why you should accept them or give them a chance. So my first rental, exactly. I priced it too high. Attractive marketing. I think we, as a consumer these days in any industry, if you don't have pictures of stuff, we get weary. If you're trying to sell a house or sell a rental or sell anything, people want a little more than just the cover page. So having pictures and good pictures, don't take pictures of your place blown out with the current tenant stuff in there. I tell people you could get professional pictures done for $100 when it's vacant this year, and then you could use those pictures for the next 3 vacancies. And you always have them up front, and you can put them on the market while the place is getting the turnover done. So I think pictures and attractive marketing. And also now I went to a marketing course on this last year, but stop putting in your marketing the 3.5 pages of just blah 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 bullet point. The consumer today is we all have ADHD, and we need to know high level stuff fast. So bullet point all your marketing is one of the big things I took out of that conference that we went to. And ease of showing. There's a lot of opportunities nowadays for lockbox showing lockboxes that people can go and consumers can go themselves. Works great in A and B class neighborhoods, but would avoid them in C and D. But making sure that you're able to show. If you only can show on Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. in the morning, then you're going to get a lot less people than if you're showing at 5 o'clock at night on Saturdays and Sundays. So those are just some of the things I put in the blog recently.
Got it. Can you say more about the lockbox thing? Does that allow a prospective tenant to actually let themselves in without the presence of an agent?
Yes. So we have there's multiple different ways you could get these lock boxes, and there's multiple different levels of security. Some are better than others, but for us, we use Mojo. We feel they have the Show Mojo, which we feel they have the best security for their lock boxes. And they actually offer an insurance policy against something going wrong. Something going wrong could be someone steals a fridge or somebody leaves the door open and somebody breaks in. So there's a lot of ways to hedge your risk when it comes to these showing us lock boxes these days.
Gotcha. Any other best practices in terms of marketing, like the type of messaging that is effective to attract an ideal type of tenant? I know you mentioned the bullet points, keep it short, good photos. Any other tips there?
I think in that first line or that headline of any listing, whether it be on Zillow or Trulia or MLS, is to put the 3 or 4 most important things. They always say put the bedrooms as your first thing. If it's 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, because a lot of people will pass up because they just think it's not a 2-bedroom. So to put the bedrooms in there, the baths kind of in that first line, and the 2 or 3 great things. For us, it might be a 2-car garage versus a 1-car garage in that neighborhood, or in the city stuff, laundry in the unit's the biggest thing you can have. So if you don't have that in your headline, you are selling yourself short on the opportunity you could get to get that thing rented faster.
Awesome. Okay, so now you're getting prospective tenants in the door. Maybe they're coming to the showings. What are some tips or best practices for actually screening tenants? Like, what do you look for in a credit, background, eviction check? What should you be asking for when you're reference calling past landlords?
So one of the biggest things that we did about 4 years ago was put together a screening matrix. And, we could talk about all the things you collect and the stuff we do to underwrite a tenant. But once we collect all those things, we put into a point system that we're able to score a tenant, that a tenant then becomes is either rated acceptable, high risk, or denial. And then that helps us then really understand our risk level. And high risk for us always isn't just the guy that's got out of jail last week. High risk for us is first-time renters. They've never experienced a bad landlord. They've never had a cost this much. So that right away, they're high risk. And they're paying the ass a lot of times. So we, over the years, we built this matrix to have the information. We went back and scored all of our most annoying, aggravating, and bad tenants we had in our research to put together this matrix. And I'm happy to share that matrix with your listeners as well, too, if they ever want to reach out and get a copy to make it their own.
Cool. So what are some things that folks should look for?
We in that matrix, we have a variable of credit score, but, we are big on making sure that they're paying rent. If current renters, I think their current rental history tells a lot. And, we do the landlord verification, like we physically call landlords, but I don't think it's worth its weight because I could apply today, put your name down, buy you lunch next week, and say, hey, make sure you tell them I paid this much and I lived with you this long and this went. So there's a lot of cheating when it comes to that. But we're big on the proof of rent. So now it used to be cleared rent checks, but now it's more of the snapshots of the proof of the quick pay and the proof of the online payments, and that tells a story. When they send over their rent payments, it tells you how much they paid, who they're paying it to. If they're paying the full amount. And the red flags that come out of that is if you're paying partial payments, if you're paying different amounts every month because you're holding back money for maintenance items, then are you really paying the landlord of record? And the landlord of record, that kind of goes into another thing, is if they're paying Doug Smith, but when we go into the tax records and the owner is Jim Jones, then that's a red flag for us. So we want an explanation on that. So we're always looking for, our goal is to search out all the red flags and get written explanations from the tenants for those things. Now, Jim Jones might just have a property manager, but we need to see some proof of that because then it's a red flag otherwise. Cash, people that pay cash only too, that's another big red flag for us because especially that's when you get their statements for their paychecks. If it's got direct deposit, but they're paying their landlord cash, they should still be able to pull a paper trail of them pulling money out of their account to give to their account. There's a lot of landlords that take cash. There's no doubt about that. I think they could beat the system with that. But there should still be some sort of paper trail that a tenant can produce.
Got it. Awesome. Do you run background checks?
Yes, we do background checks. We do eviction checks, and we do credit checks.
What are the key items you're looking for in these reports?
With the credit check, you're always looking at payment history. I think I don't know if I say this the right way, but I think the credit score system model is kind of skewed, where someone could be 100% on time forever and just have not much credit and still be in the 600s. So I think it's payment history that's huge. I think especially with utilities, a lot of times key indicator of someone's cash flow issues is how they pay their utilities. So seeing that on their credit score that their utilities are coming up month after month, being on time, then on their credit report, then that's quality. Evictions, the eviction check, I think that is, that is what it is. Have you been filed against? Like the risk of them being filed against again is huge. And then the background, we just here in Cook County in Chicago, they just passed some new laws about we can't discriminate up front on background issues on background. We have to make that a secondary scoring. But for us, there's not, we really don't care if someone got busted 10 years ago for marijuana. We're looking more for domestic violence issues and things that the neighbors could be mad about us bringing into the neighborhood and so forth. So,
got it. You mentioned utility on-time payment is particularly important. Can you say more about sort of why that is what makes utility special, as opposed to, say, credit card payments or something, car payment?
Car payment's another one as well, too. I guess you loop it up. But, those things are, call it the top 4 or 5 things that everybody has. They start with rent, and then they have they have to pay utilities or whatever that, and they have to pay that car payment every month. Then if they have a strong history of that, then that kind of tells a sign that their priorities of the top 4 or 5 things are there. The credit cards, you might see a lapse of 30 days, and that could be something stupid that they're on vacation and they missed the warning, or they switched bank accounts and it didn't take out and all that stuff. So those dings here and there over the years are not as important as keeping the lights on to us, I guess.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Just curious, are there any stories, you don't have to say names, of course, but are there any stories of tenant applicant shenanigans that you've seen before? And what are some of the ones maybe that have come up over and over that you're now well attuned to sussing out versus maybe some of the far out ones?
So one of I think the biggest things that we ever experienced that was just it was a shame, I guess, is we had such an elaborate scam that was going on in Chicago with individuals posing as representatives of some larger non-for-profits. That's saying, hey, we'll apply, we'll put you in there, and we'll pay all your month, we'll pay your rent. And it was well known, and they knew the system of it, so they were plugging tenants in when they're basically that company was those individuals were taking money from these renters, again posing to the renters that they're part of this program. Hey, I'll get you on the program, get all your rent paid, just give me $500. So that was a big scam that happened a few years ago with applications with non-for-profits. Now that's more of a CD class neighborhood issue that we saw here in Chicago. But shenanigans, you have, I think one of the problems you have calling your landlord as well too is if I'm calling you to hear about your tenant that you're trying to get the hell out of your place, then you have the high, it's a good, there's a good probability you're not going to tell them really how you are, because then that lowers your risk of getting that tenant out of your place faster. So I think that's a huge danger in using the landlord reference as that. We've had rental stubs created multiple times as well too. And the thing that petscreening.com I was talking to is good is we get a lot of people saying, oh, I got my pit bull and he's a care pet or he's an emotional support pet. It's like, man, your dog is going to tear everyone apart on that street. But that petscreening.com is something that helps weed out some of those people.
Awesome. All right. So shifting gears toward managing tenants. Now you've got the tenant, actually, they've signed the lease. They're about to sign the lease and they're committed. They want the place. Are there any lease clauses that landlords should consider including in their leases to help incentivize or enforce good behavior, perhaps maybe that other leases don't typically have? Are there things that you've seen come up over the years that are really helpful to have in your lease?
Well, I think to start that conversation, I think one of the biggest things that I see landlords do wrong, especially self-managers, is they just have a crap lease to start. They might have got something off the internet. They might have gotten something, Staples or something like that. But having a local, I think leases really these days are very localized with the different ordinances, the different villages, cities, municipalities have. For here we have it's a big crime-free addendum state. but having the right lease to start. Now, a quick default to having the right lease is usually you reach out to the local realtor board or a realtor and utilize their template as a start. And usually that covers you 90%. But as far as having what you're having in your lease, it's laying out the expectations, I think, a lot. I think having I think one big thing where I see issues happen is the move out part, or the holdover part, or what that really looks like, or what the expectation of the house to be when you move out, identifying normal wear and tear versus tenant heavy wear. So having that is huge. The expectation of the move out. The other thing is access. I think having a clearly defined of when you as the landlord are allowed to have access is important. For us here in the city of Chicago, it's a requirement of 48 hours, but we want to make sure we educate the tenant up front that, hey, we don't give a heck. We're going to give you 48-hour notice, and if we got to come in there, we're going to come in there. For our suburbs, it's more lax, where it's even more important that we let them know that, hey, we're going to give you notice. We're coming in. Like, it's not an option. So the move out policies, we talked about that. But yeah, those are the couple things. I think what people, for us here in Chicago or Illinois, we're a very judicial state where a lot of you can put anything you want in the lease, but the tenants have a lot of rights. And I think that's a very similar when you get into the West Coast and so forth. But there's a lot of tenant rights. And I think one of the more important parts of this that I want to point out is making sure you have a good attorney to reference. Not an attorney that's going to jam you for $250 every time you call them. Having a good attorney in your network that, hey man, this happened. And this is my lease this way. How should I do it? So, or having a local property manager just in your pocket to be able to talk to. But that's kind of a lot of laying out the expectations. Now, our experience is tenants don't read the leases. We even had tenant orientation programs at one time. We put together some video sense, and having some of that is important. I think video versus writing is important these days if you want to get your message across to tenants. But a lot of times they don't read the lease. So a lot of times it's having some of those details in there that you can refer back to, but you still end up in the pickles because they never read their lease.
Gotcha. You mentioned, being clear about what condition of move out is or should be in the lease can be important. What are some rules of thumb or best practices you've seen in terms of how you define acceptable wear and tear versus excessive?
It ends up being, if we have to do anything more than a touch-up paint of a handful of holes after a year or two, after it's freshly painted, then that gets into the excessive. Similar with flooring. Carpeting should last you 5-6 years, and if you put new carpet in and now you're questioning if you have to replace it or not, that's excessive. With pets, I think it's always important to put on the tenant that they have to have professionally cleaned carpet at the exit as part of your pet policy. And I see other landlords that do that across the board. If you have carpet, no matter what, you have to provide us at move out a professional Stanley Steamer type invoice. Not what you go rent down at the local Albertsons, but professional carpet cleaning. The wear and tear. For us, we put light bulbs. And if the ceiling is less than 9 feet tall, you're required to put all light bulbs in all fixtures. And that ends up being, a lot of and that end up in our lease because we're going through and putting in 30, 40 light bulbs sometimes in units. And that just added up. So we put that in our lease as something that we put back on the tenant.
Cool. Do you recommend, incidentally, to have, like in a multifamily building, to have the leases all, even if tenants come in the door at different times, do you recommend having the leases all expire or terminate around the same time and then renew around the same time? Or do you recommend staggering them more evenly over the year to the extent possible?
So I'll answer that two different ways. We do definitely recommend in a multifamily scenario staggering, but it ends up being based on time of year. I'd rather have six people move out in June, or the risk of six people moving out in June, than six people over the next 6 months going into the winter months in the holiday season. For us here, it's cold right now, and there's not too many people. It's today's Saturday, but there's not too many people moving, unless they have to. So what we put in place we put this in place last year, and it was a huge payoff for us already this year, is starting September 1st, we did 18-month leases. So anyone moving in September, we did 18-month leases. Anyone that moved in October, 17-month leases, and so on up until January, where we start doing 12-month leases again. And what this did for us this year is it slowed down drastically for our move-outs in the fall, and it takes off all the vacancy issues, or the leasing has less pressure on them to produce in a time of year when, man, they're up against virtually impossible sometimes. So
I see. So it sounds like you try to have your leases, the cycle begin at the beginning of January. Is that correct?
Yeah, oddly enough, February is our second largest move-in month of the year. So it goes April, February, March is kind of our biggest move-in months, based on how we have things set up. And I think February ends up being a lot of pent-up demand after the holidays. Last week we had more showings on our leasing side than we did the whole first 3 weeks of December. And I think it's just like people are like, oh shit, holidays are over, I still got to move.
I see. Huh. Interesting. So then the rest of the year you're fairly quiet then, outside of February, March, April?
Not necessarily quiet. I mean, based on the size we're at now, but it's a little more consistent, I guess, throughout the year, or throughout the rest of the year, than going into really call it September, October. Got
it. When the lease expires, do you have them renew a new lease, or does it just go month to month?
So we renew 100%. They get a new lease. We start our renewal process about 90 days out. Our goal is to kind of get to them to renew before they're even thinking about moving. So they sign a whole new lease, and we used to have them sign an addendum, but because we change our lease about 2 or 3 times a year, we have kind of scheduled kind of lease updates that we do. We want to make sure they're on the newest lease at all times.
I see. So that it sounds like that's a requirement then for tenants to stay in your properties. They have to be on a lease. They cannot be month to month.
Yes, we have in our lease, we put an option. If you want to stay month to month, there is, I think we have a $300 one-time fee for them to stay month to month. And that is really to cater to the people that, we bought a house that's under contract and it's not going to close for 60 days. Or we bought a house and we got to do stuff to it. So that helps our owners pick up a couple extra bucks for the risk they're going to pick up if it might fall into a couple months later. So,
got it. That's a interesting one, because is conceivable that somebody who's renting could end up buying a home and then not need to rent anymore because they're going to move in their own house. Do you recommend? Actually, it just made me think. Do you recommend offering a month-to-month option, but just at a slightly higher rent, so the tenant can choose, but if they're going to go month-to-month, they're paying a little bit extra?
Yeah, no, we definitely, we on a case-by-case scenario, sometimes that will be the conversation of, it might be because there's not a definitive date. They might be up for a job transfer. Or sometimes we'll negotiate, all right, you sign a year lease, but if you break the lease, it's $1,000 fee. It might be less than what we're not going to hold them to the lease at that point. So sometimes those things end up being on a case by case, but our goal is to look out for the owner's interest in making sure that any risk they're putting out there for the surprise move out or the non-attractive seasonal move out, that they're covered.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. So now tenants signed the lease. You've given them the keys. They're ready to move in. Are there things that landlords and property managers can do to set a really good impression for tenants who are just moving in, to really wow them and make them feel great about choosing your place versus the place down the street?
So a book that I read a couple of years ago, and actually our entire office is going through reading it this quarter. It's kind of a group event. Is Never Lose a Customer Again. And it's really about the customer experience. And, our ultimate fiduciary customer is our owners, but no matter what, we have our tenants are our customers as well too. So it's really that experience. It's that, I think no matter what, we all get buyer's remorse, no matter what step it is. Even, you apply like, oh, did I apply for the right one? And making sure that when they sign the lease that, there's still some doubt sometimes. And moving is a stressful time as well too. So we're always trying to constantly get the message of, welcome and let us know how we can help. And, we have a series of messages that go out after each step of the, application, lease signing, and kind of throughout the move-in process. One of the things that, so those messages kind of help instill that they made the right decision. That's kind of our mindset. We don't, at this point, we're not leaving care baskets or anything like that at the house, but we try to make the process more functional in the sense of we do lockbox move-ins for tenants. So if they want to move it at 10 o'clock at night on Saturday night, they can. It's not, hey, you got to be there by Friday at 4 to move in. They can move anytime they want. So we require 3 things up front from them before we give them the lockbox code, and then they can move in a week later if they want to. And then we also give the tenants opportunities to document the property themselves. So our reports that we do in our moving process, they have an app they download, and they'll go through and they'll document it themselves. And that gives us, it gives them the chance to document it the way they want. It gives us another chance to make sure we didn't miss anything, even though we have a couple of inspections we do prior to make sure everything's rent ready. But then also on the back end we explain it to them. It kind of covers everyone's butt, and they get the opportunity to make sure that their security deposit is protected on the backside.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So now the tenant's in the door, they've moved in. How often should the property manager or landlord be inspecting the interiors for routine maintenance checks? And is there, what is the checklist? What is on your checklist, for example, of things that you're looking for when you do routine maintenance checks?
So we don't go out specifically for routine inspections. We offer it as a service, but we tell our clients or people we're talking to that you don't need to if we're putting the right tenant in there. You don't need to. I don't like to go in and kind of go in just to go in sake. And but what we do tell owners, and what is a reality, is we're on the property. We have, I think, an average of like 1.5 work orders per unit per year. I think that's how it breaks out. And then we're in there for the annual HVAC inspection cleaning. And then we might be in there for a rental. A lot of these municipalities have rental inspections. So someone from GC Realty is going into these properties 3 to 4 times a year at least for other reasons. Now, what we'll do on those inspections is take the opportunity. All of our techs have, I think we just added something, eight things that they're looking for. I don't know what the 8 specific things are to list off, but the couple of important things that they're looking for is tenants that aren't supposed to be there. There are a lot of people crashed on the couch and stuff like that. People that are on the lease is our goal. The outside, making sure the outside is not a distraction to the neighbors or an attraction to the city. Inside, we're always looking for life safety things. The fire, smoke, CO2 detectors are all in place, all operational. We're looking for the banister that's loose, the porch that's got the deck that's got a foot through it, where it's now a tripping hazard. So there's 2 things. We're looking to make sure the tenants following kind of who's supposed to be there, and we're looking for things that are going to mitigate risk. So each time we're in there, that 3 or 4 times a year, we're looking at those things, and that serves as our unofficial inspection.
Got it. Are there other maintenance items that you're looking for? Like for properties that I own, I'm really interested in making sure that the pipes under the sink, the water, there's nothing leaking, because that's going to be a big problem if there's like a small leak and it goes ignored. Just curious, what are other things that you're actually inspecting from a maintenance perspective, just to make sure that the property's in good condition?
Plumbing is always one of the number one things. We have on the supply side of things, I think we probably control about half of the water bills that get paid. And we have, when we get that bill, if it's over X amount of dollars per unit per month, then that's a trigger that something's leaking. So we have that on the supply side of things. On the the drainage side, one of our videos is a plumbing hazard video for tenants to make sure that they need to let us know, or they're going to be responsible for that damage of those issues. In particular, in condo buildings. Those are where the bigger issues become, where I don't control what happens downstairs, what that downstairs guy does to fix this issue or call the association on us. So, plumbing is one of the number one things. And then making sure that the furnace filters are always kind of changed out. There's services out there now that deliver them, but we still are always making sure that those are being changed out at least 6 times a year.
Okay, awesome. So now the tenant is they've been living there for a while. They're coming up close to renewal time. What are some best practices that property managers and landlords can do to maximize tenant retention? And I guess as related to that, are there any incentives that a landlord or property manager can offer to try to retain good tenants without, you can obviously always discount rent, but I'm just curious if there are, other effective incentives that can motivate a tenant to stay.
Well, you know what? I think it doesn't necessarily happen at the renewal process. I think so. We've taken all the data over the years from our application side of the business, where people are coming to us, the reason why you're leaving, and we have a couple different ways we ask the reason why you're leaving on our application, because we want that data for understanding why people leave. And the number one response is it has to do with maintenance or upkeep of the property. There's bugs everywhere. My guy won't get the exterminator out there, or my stove has been broken for 2 months, and so forth. So we are big on the responsiveness of maintenance because we know that's going to be the number one. And especially in our A and B class properties, they might only get a work order a year or a work order every 2 years. And if we mess that up, that's their entire memory of us as a company when they want to go to renew. So I think throughout the term of the lease is making sure that they are going to that they're getting the service they need, or we're holding up our end of the bargain of the lease. And with the lease renewal process, I think, especially if it's below rent or what other things are going for in that area, we might be happy having $1,550 with this current tenant because we like the tenant, but the market is $1,600 or $1,650. We'll be clear to show them like, hey, listen, the same house is going for $1,650, so you're getting a good deal. Sign. So we try to get, and not everyone for circumstances of family or job or whatever are going to renew. So you're going to have a percentage that are just not going to renew based on that. It doesn't make sense for them to live there anymore. But I think the biggest control you could have over keeping the people that should stay is really your level of customer service. Now, there's a lot of random questions that happen throughout the year of, hey, you know what, my tenant ledger is showing that I'm $5 short when I paid that $5. And again, back to the responsiveness of getting that information back to the tenant in a timely manner, or some sort of technology tool where they can solve those problems on their own. And that goes a long way to why people are going to stick around. If they're, I think the general consensus of human nature is if the nail you're sitting on doesn't hurt that bad, you're not gonna move. So I figure if we could be at least a tack in our service, and I'm totally downgrading how good we are, but if we could be good, then they're not going to go anywhere in that sense. And I think that's true for any landlords.
Okay, cool. So shifting a little bit here now. So we've been talking about tenants that are good, they're paying on time, and they're sort of good citizens of the community. If you think about tenants who are not working out, what are some best practices or rules that you must follow in terms of evicting? And I'd love to probe 2 cases in particular. So tenant fails to pay rent. What I'm interested in understanding is what are the sequence of actions that the landlord or property manager need to take and when? Just high level, not like the legal aspects. And then second case, like bad behavior from a tenant, noise, nuisance, they have unauthorized occupants or whatever. How do you handle these things?
I think both cases, the most important thing that you can do is react fast and with teeth. Empty threats are people remember those. Like, I did this before and he didn't do anything about it. So empty threats ruin all or will continue any bad cycles of behavior. So, and this is something that, especially if it's a newer tenant, we want to get out front and make sure they know who's boss here. And all the different states have different regulations, but for here in Chicago, to cure something, whether it be quiet enjoyment or they have different additional people in there, for us, it's our 10-day notice. So to deliver a 10-day notice with the threat to evict them after 10 days, unless they solve whatever they're doing, it's going to be our first step. We do use other, whether it be the alderman or the village or the city as teeth too, saying, hey, the city called and this is a problem, and if the city's going to be down our throat, then we're going to send them right over to you. And then a lot of times when they know it's not just coming from your property manager and it's coming from somebody else, then it's a little more real to them that this could be a big problem if I don't fix this. So reacting quick and with teeth and knowing that if they don't do this, you will take it to the next level. I think that's very important.
Cool. Any other thoughts regarding tenants who fail to pay rent?
Again, I think what we realized is you can set up as a property manager or a landlord, you can set up as many payment plans as you want, but you really have you're acting in good faith at that point. So for us, what we realized about 3 years ago now is, let's get them in court fast. And we did this we modeled this after another large apartment owner here in Chicago and how they were successfully keeping tenants or getting their bad payments corrected, but getting them into court fast. So if you have, I think there's a very fine line of when a tenant says, hey, it's cheaper for me to move than it is to pay my back landlord, you have to get them in court before that line hits. And, for us, that line ends up being, I think, about a month and a half into it. So if you get them into court and get them in 45 days, then in court, for us here in Cook County, we're able to create a court-ordered payment plan. Now, that court-ordered payment plan is very powerful because the judge is signing off on this. This is no longer GC Realty or any of the good faith BS that we've been talking about the last 3 weeks and you not paying. So now for us here with the court-ordered payment plan, if they miss one of those payments, we call a sheriff the next day versus having to start the whole process over. If you and me agree on a payment plan and you don't do it, then as a tenant that I still have to come out and serve you a 5-day notice. You still have to file for eviction. We still have to wait for the court date. So again, getting them into court fast and working in this payment plan often saves a lot of relationships. We were talking about this the other day. All the people that we've had to do that with, it was like over 80% of them are still in our units. That means that they're still in our units because they corrected their payment issue, and they have an eviction on their record now too. So it's not going to be too easy for them to move. So that's not trying to pigeonhole people into their options, but their decision not to pay fast has created a consequence for them. That's going to be a lot more difficult for them to move over the years.
Got it. So is that to say that if you're on a court-ordered payment plan, then you have an eviction mark on your file at that point?
Yeah. So what a lot of people, even tenants, don't understand this is the day we file for eviction, that filing for eviction is what shows up on their public records and their eviction report. So we get a lot of people that apply and on their eviction report comes up eviction, and they think because the sheriff never showed up or they left before the sheriff came that they weren't technically evicted, and that's not the case. Which is great for us or for landlords in general, because that public record of it being filed means that that's what you want to avoid, not necessarily the sheriff coming.
Oh, I see. So it's the filing itself, not the fact that you were evicted. So you don't have to be evicted to still have an eviction mark on your file. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if you're behind and I go file for eviction, then it's on your record then for 7 years in that sense. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. So a lot of owners will have, say, rent due on the 1st. There might be a few days grace period. Say if you pay up to the 5th, no harm, no foul. And then on the 6th, you're late. So are you, I'm not sure if that's the structure of your leases, but are you pretty much filing for eviction the day after?
No. So we'll do it. So we have a very for us personally, we have we have one person 40 hours a week. That's all she does is bust chops on the collection side of things, and you get a lot out of that part of collections, and then you also learn which ones are not going to be able to collect on right away. So we do not file until they're behind 1 month rent and $1. So basically day 31 or the first day of the next month is when they qualify for that. And in that 30 days, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth and trying to work them out. Maybe they made a partial payment and all that stuff. So The ones that actually get to for us is a very small percentage that get to that point. Where we end up in eviction court a lot more often is when we inherit situations. Because again, if you're doing that whole the rental screening and the rental matrix, your risk goes down a lot less of ever being in that situation. So
awesome. Okay, so let's say an owner has been self-managing for a while, and maybe they're tired, or maybe they have too many properties to self-manage, and they want to hire a professional property management company like yours. What are some of the key factors that an owner should be considering when hiring a property management company? And what are some key questions they should be sure to ask when interviewing a property manager?
Yeah, no, that's all good stuff. I think a lot of people, when they're interviewing a property manager and they find out that the property manager is an investor or manages some of their own properties, they look at it as a bad thing. Like, oh, you're going to take care of your properties before you're going to take care of mine. When I think any owners that I know or investors that I know that have property management businesses, like they take care of the customer far before they take care of their own properties. Ours is a case in point. But I think having somebody that knows what it's like to lose as your property manager is huge. And when I say knows what it's like to lose, is having a property manager or a team of in your property management that has had to go through eviction or has had to do a $7,000 rehab or turnover because the last tenant destroyed the place or turned a faucet on, or some crazy leak like you were talking about before happened as they left and no one discovered for a week. Knowing what it's like to lose in that situation is huge, because then your property manager then is losing sleep over your issues versus someone that just doesn't know and they treat it more like, it's not my money, I'll deal with it tomorrow type thing. So I think that's the first and foremost is important. Understanding how this property manager is going to communicate with you. And that's a very broad saying, but asking them what you get in response of how you're going to communicate. So for us, we have about 10 different points where hey, these are the times we're going to reach out to you when these triggers hit. And you could expect that then. So we take over of the properties we take on as new customers each year. About 56% of them last year that came from other property managers. And the number one response of almost every single one of them, I think short of about 3 or 4, was the communication, and mostly revolving around the responsiveness. They didn't tell me my tenant moved out. They didn't tell me my tenant was going to move out. They didn't tell me about the repair that was $600 that just showed up on my statement. I had to email them 3 times before to get one email back. So I think understanding communication and how that's going to flow with your property manager is probably number one thing, because I think that's the number one problem with the property management industry out there. You'll see in our marketing now that we're out there boasting ourselves as most responsive. And it's because we get back to you. We have, in our owner handbook, you're going to see that if you email us, the expectation of how fast we're going to get back to you. And those are things that you need to know up front of, hey, if I email you, when can I expect a response? So I think that's huge. And then if you're not going to ask questions, I guess, are not necessarily related to questions, but reviews. I think reviews are huge because, reviews really shows you that company is caring about the reputation. We have 260 some Google reviews, and I think we're about 100 more than anyone else in our market. But we really care. Now, don't get me wrong. I got my wife that left us a review, and there's when you start seeing these companies that have hundreds and hundreds of reviews, there's a lot of, it's not all 100% tenants and customers and all that stuff, but they care about the reputation so much that they're going to do the right thing no matter what to make sure their reputation doesn't get touched in that sense, whether it be from an owner, tenant, or whatnot. And then that all leads back to the best interest of the landlord in the end of the day.
Are there any other questions that owners should prospectively ask a property manager when they're evaluating one?
Yes, I think so. Real estate in general is all about numbers, right? And understanding percentages and so forth. So asking specific questions of what your eviction rate is, or what's your average time on market this year so far for any vacancy. How many days on average can I expect it from the time the tenant moves out to the time it's on the market? what is your uncollectible at the end of the year for any tenants that moved out. So any property manager that knows their numbers or can get it back to relatively easy, man, it is huge, and that's a huge separation from all the other property managers in the business. The important thing to keep in mind here is almost any property manager in this country is going to be in that 6 to 10% range. But there's a huge variation of deliverables that you get. So I think for us, what we used to always get asked is, what do you do for we charge 8%. What do you do for the 8%? And what we created was defining our services, which basically breaks down what you get for the money. And having that be in your possession from whoever you're interviewing to understand what you're getting and what you can expect. And, I think for our management fee, it's 4 pages of what you get for that 8%. And 2.5 of the pages might be things that might not ever come up. But at least when those things come up that we're not going to jam you for an extra charge or whatnot. So understanding what you're getting is huge in the sense of researching property managers.
Awesome. Are there how should an owner go about reference checking a property manager?
You know what? I get that question all the time, where they'll ask me to ask, you got any current clients I can speak with that can talk about their experience? And I tell them, I say, this is that question is like me with the landlord. I can give you anybody, and I'm definitely not going to give you a landlord that fired us last year, or a client that fired us. So what I recommend everyone to do, especially nowadays, is you Google my name, you Google up my company's name, and you go 4 or 5 pages deep in the internet. If you see nothing, that's a red flag. If you see something bad, that's a sign. That's a red flag. If you see good stuff, that's good. If you go on places like Bigger Pockets, I think we haven't talked about that at all, but Bigger Pockets is a huge place as far as references of just going on there saying, hey, I'm in the Chicago market, or I'm in the Boise, Idaho market. What's a good property manager to hire? You'll get honest opinions on there. And even you Google up the property manager's name, they're a good manager or a really bad manager, they're going to end up on forums like that where you could get real research from people commenting on there. And you can even reach out to those people. Those are going to be the best people that can share their experiences on there.
Awesome. One thing I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned a moment ago, and I wanted to be sure to loop back to follow up. You mentioned that, there sometimes, it's rare, but sometimes you'll have the situation where you got to go in and do like $7,000 of, rehab because the tenant trashed the place. Just curious, as an owner who may be concerned about that type of situation, even if you have to pay that out of pocket up front, you would go after the tenant for that, right? Like you would file against them for damage to the property. It may take some time, but eventually, even if it comes to garnishing their wages, like the owner should expect to get that money back, right?
Yeah. So every state's a little different as far as their collection policy or what it takes to file for that. Now, there's certain things that, even if a tenant has a $100 balance or a $300 balance or $1,000 in damage over their security deposit, it doesn't make sense to file for them and go collect and try garnishing. But it does make sense to put them with a collection agency, maybe only get 50% of it, but at least it goes on to their credit. And at some point in the next 10 years, if they buy a house, you might stand a chance to get that money back. I had a call about 2 months ago from somebody from 9 years ago that we're closing on our house next week and we got to pay you this $914. I'm like, oh yes, that's awesome. But then it comes down to the tenant base. So that $7,000 damage for us, if it's a Section 8 tenant that, we're never going to collect that from that particular tenant. It becomes a business decision at that point to do. Now, if it's a Class A tenant that, and again, those type of problems typically don't happen in our Class A, Class B type situations where there's actually means to go after. So it ends up being a case-by-case scenario, but they're always reviewed to make sure that if there's any opportunity to recoup something, then we want to try.
Is there a threshold that you guys use? Like if it's above this dollar amount, we're going to go through the court process. Otherwise, we're just going to send them to collections.
Yeah, the attorneys are going to typically tell you about $10,000, or at least here in Chicago, as far as it's worth it. Because here's the thing, especially so-called an eviction case that you have, you won the judgment of $10,000. Now you still have to go file for another judgment to collect that money and garnish wages and all that stuff. So usually the legal aspect of going after a sum is going to be a few $1,000s to start, and you still don't guarantee that you're going to get it. So you might add additional bad debt on top of bad debt. So it's a case by case a lot of times.
All right, Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. This was super insightful. Really appreciate your sharing all your experience and wisdom around property management and tenant management with us. Where can people find out more about you and your work and services?
You can follow, I put a blog out there. I'm doing at least a post a week on our website, gcrealtyinc.com. And then, I'm very active on Bigger Pockets. I actually did a podcast on there as well, too, if anyone's interested in checking that out. But I'm on there. I'm always trying to get feedback and talk to other investors, local and around the country. So
awesome. We'll make sure we link to all those things in the show notes. Thanks so much again, and best of luck with everything.
Yeah, I appreciate you having on me.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.